Rain fell like silver threads from the sky, coating the streets in a shimmering, cold layer. The city was alive with noise, engines humming, neon signs buzzing, footsteps rushing through puddles. Yet, in the middle of all this movement, she sat still. She was small for her kind, her thin frame wrapped in clothes that were torn at the edges. Her skin had a faint blue glow under the streetlights, her dark hair plastered to her face by rain. She hugged her knees tightly, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. The world moved around her, but no one stopped. No one even looked down. In this city, weakness was dangerous, and kindness was rare. People learned to ignore the suffering of others. They kept their heads down and walked faster, pretending they saw nothing except him. The human had only been here for 2 weeks. The alien world was still strange to him, the sharp smell of the air, the double shadows cast by twin moons, the way people avoided eye contact. But when he saw her there, alone and crying in the middle of the street, something in him refused to keep walking. He slowed his steps, feeling the weight of stares from strangers who clearly thought he was making a mistake. He ignored them and crouched down beside her. The rain soaked his jacket, but he didn't care. "Hey," his voice was gentle. "What happened?" She flinched. Her head rose slightly, revealing wide eyes with a strange silver ring around the pupils. For a moment, she just stared at him, as if she couldn't believe someone had spoken to her. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She shook her head and looked away. "It's all right," he said quietly. "I'm not here to hurt you." Her hands gripped her knees tighter, and her voice came out hoarse. "Go. Before they see you, they?" he asked, glancing around. The crowd had thinned, and the rain seemed louder now, somewhere in the shadows of a nearby alley. Movement caught his eye, a quick shift, like someone stepping back out of sight. She swallowed hard. "Please, just go." He should have walked away. That's what everyone else would have done. That's what the smart thing to do was. But something in her voice, the fear, the exhaustion, kept him there. "Come on," he said, holding out a hand. "You can't stay here." She looked at his hand like it was something dangerous. Her eyes darted to the alley, then back to him. For a moment, it seemed she might refuse. But the sound of a low hum, almost like a mechanical growl, came from the darkness, and her breath caught. Her fingers touched his, light at first, then gripping tightly. He pulled her up. She was lighter than he expected, trembling as though she hadn't eaten in days. The human took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She opened her mouth to protest, but he didn't give her the chance. "Let's move," he said firmly, guiding her toward the other side of the street. They walked quickly, the rain disguising the sound of their steps. Behind them, the shadow in the alley shifted again. Another figure appeared, tall, wrapped in a black cloak that blended into the night. The human didn't look back, but he felt the presence following. "What's your name?" he asked as they turned into a narrower street. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Lariah, I'm Daniel," he replied. "Now tell me, who are they?" She shook her head. "Not here." Her eyes kept scanning the rooftops and corners, as though expecting an attack at any moment. Daniel tightened his grip on her arm slightly, not to hurt her, but to make sure she didn't disappear into the shadows. He had no idea what he had stepped into, but he knew one thing: the fear in her eyes was real. The street narrowed into a dim passage lit by a single flickering light. A sound echoed. Behind them, soft, deliberate footsteps. Daniel stopped, slowly turning his head. The cloaked figure had entered the passage, moving with calm confidence, even through the rain. Daniel could see a faint red light glowing under the hood. Lariah's breath quickened. "It's them," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He stepped in front of her, blocking the stranger's view. His mind raced. He had no weapon, no plan, and no idea why this alien girl was being hunted. But he knew one thing: He wasn't going to let them take her. The figure stopped about 10 steps away, silent. The red light under the hood pulsed. Slowly, like the beat of a heart. Then, in a voice like metal scraping on stone, it said, "Step aside, human." Daniel's jaw tightened. His voice was calm, but cold. Not happening. For a moment, the only sound was rain hitting the metal roofs above. Then the figure took one slow step forward, and Daniel felt Lariah's grip on his arm tighten like a vice. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just a street encounter. This was the beginning of something far bigger, and he had just chosen a side. Daniel didn't wait for the figure to take another step. He turned, pulling Lariah by the hand, and broke into a run. The narrow passage twisted between tall, leaning buildings. Rainwater rushing down the cracks in the uneven ground. Lariah's feet splashed in shallow puddles as she tried to keep up, her breath short and fast. Daniel didn't dare look back, but he could feel the heavy presence following them. Silent except for the occasional metallic scrape against the walls. They emerged into a wider street where glowing signs flickered in colors Daniel still hadn't learned the names of. The alien crowd moved like a river, heads down, shoulders brushing. None of them cared about the two running figures weaving through the flow. Daniel slowed just enough to blend in, his eyes scanning for any turn that could give them cover. He spotted a half-collapsed archway leading into what looked like an abandoned courtyard and pulled her inside. The rain didn't reach here, only a steady drip from a cracked pipe in the corner. Lariah leaned against the wall, catching her breath. Daniel kept watch on the archway, listening for the sound of pursuit. After a long moment, the crowd noise faded into the distance, but he didn't relax. He knew someone out there was still searching for her, and maybe for him now too. Who are they? He asked again, his voice low. She hesitated, glancing toward the entrance before meeting his eyes. "Hunters," she said softly. "They work for Morphu." For someone powerful. Her hands twisted the edge of his jacket as she spoke. "I was supposed to be taken to him, but I escaped. That's why they're here." Daniel frowned. "Taken? For what?" She shook her head. "If I tell you, you'll wish you hadn't stopped for me." "Too late for that," he replied without hesitation. "You need to tell me everything." Her gaze dropped to the wet ground, her voice almost a whisper. "He buys people not just from my world, but from others. Humans too. They don't come back." Daniel felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He'd heard rumors of such things, whispered stories in spaceport bars, but seeing someone right in front of him who had barely escaped made it real in a way words never could. Before he could ask more, a faint vibration ran through the ground. Lariah's head snapped up. "They're using trackers," she whispered. "They can follow my trail." Daniel scanned the courtyard. His eyes fell on a rusted maintenance door at the far side. "Come on," he said. And they crossed the uneven ground quickly. The door groaned as he pushed it open, revealing a narrow tunnel lined with old pipes and cables. The air inside was warmer, almost stifling, and smelled faintly of rust and damp. Their footsteps echoed as they moved deeper. Lariah walked close behind him, her head turning often as if she expected something to come crawling out of the shadows. After several turns, they reached a grated exit that looked out over the lower docks. Massive cargo ships floated in place, tethered to the platforms by thick cables. The neon haze from the city above barely reached this far down, leaving the area in a dim, eerie half-light. Lariah's voice was tight with urgency. "If we can reach the freight lifts, we can get out of the city before they close the gates." "At dawn," Daniel nodded. "Then, that's where we're going." They moved quickly along the catwalk, the metal groaning under their weight from somewhere in the darkness below. A low voice echoed up in a language Daniel didn't understand. Lariah froze, eyes wide. She whispered, "Hunters." Two figures stepped into view at the far end of the catwalk. the red glow under their hoods pulsing like slow heartbeats. Daniel knew they were too far to reach before the hunters closed the gap. He grabbed Laria's hand and jumped down onto a lower platform. The metal rattling under the impact, they sprinted toward the lifts. Weaving between stacks of shipping crates, the sound of boots hitting metal followed them. Steady, relentless, the freight lifts came into view. But a group of dock workers blocked the way. Laria's hand tightened around his. "They won't let us through without a pass," she said, panic in her voice. Daniel scanned the area, spotting an open cargo container on a nearby loader. "In there," he said, pulling her toward it. They climbed inside, crouching low in the shadows. The smell of machine oil and damp cloth filled the air. Outside, footsteps slowed. The hunters were close. He could hear them speaking quietly, searching. One of them passed right by the container. Daniel held his breath, every muscle. Tensely, Raya didn't move, her eyes fixed on the small gap of light at the container's edge. Minutes passed like hours before the sound of footsteps finally faded. Daniel exhaled slowly. He looked at her. "We can't keep running like this forever." Her voice trembled. "I never asked you to risk this. You should leave me." He shook his head. "Not going to happen." For a moment. Her expression softened, almost like she wanted to believe him. Then her eyes shifted toward the lift again. "We still have a chance." Daniel peered out of the container, scanning the area for movement. The dock workers were gone, and the lift platform stood empty. He nodded. "Let's move." They slipped out and crossed the platform quickly, the hum of the lift filling the air as it began to rise. Daniel glanced down at the lower levels where shadows moved like restless animals. He had no doubt the hunters would be waiting for them again. But for now, they were one step ahead, and for the first time since he'd seen her crying in the street. He thought they might actually have a way out. The lift rose slowly, each shudder of its ancient machinery echoing in the hollow shaft. Daniel stood near the control panel, eyes on the dim light above. Raya stayed close, clutching his jacket around her as if it were a shield. The silence between them was heavy, filled only by the hum of the platform and the faint drip of water from somewhere overhead. Halfway up, the lift jerked suddenly, then stopped. Daniel's hand moved to the rail, his eyes narrowing. Laria's breath quickened. "They've stopped." She whispered. From above, a metallic clang rang out, followed by the hiss of hydraulics. Daniel tilted his head back, catching sight of two figures descending the maintenance ladder fixed to the side of the shaft. The red glow beneath their hoods cut through the dim air like warning lights. Daniel's mind raced. The lift was a trap now. Staying meant being. Cornered, without thinking, he grabbed Laria's hand and yanked open the emergency hatch on the side of the platform. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and distant fuel. "Jump," he said. Her eyes widened. "We're too high. They'll be here in seconds." He cut in, his voice firm. She hesitated for only a moment before climbing through. Daniel followed, and together they leaped onto a narrow service beam running alongside the lift shaft. The metal was slick under the rain, forcing them to move slowly. The hunters above shouted something in their own tongue, their voices echoing off the walls. The beam led to a side passage, lit by flickering blue strips along the floor. They ducked into it, running until the echo of pursuit began to fade. The tunnel curved sharply before opening into a maintenance bay that smelled of burnt circuits and wet metal. Daniel scanned the area, spotting a row of small utility transports parked against the far wall. Their size was barely enough for two people, but they were fast and quiet. He moved toward them, checking for any active systems. Raya hesitated near the doorway, glancing back into the tunnel they had come from. Her voice was low, almost guilty. "You should leave me here. Take one of those and go." "They want me," Not you. Daniel straightened. Turning to face her, his tone was steady. If I was going to leave, I wouldn't be here now. For the first time, she didn't look away immediately. Her eyes searched his face as though trying to understand why he cared. She finally stepped closer. You don't know what he'll do if he catches me. Then we make sure he doesn't, Daniel said, climbing into one of the transports. She climbed in beside him, the small cockpit forcing them close. The control board flickered to life under his touch. The hum of the engine was soft, almost. Drowned by the sound of rain outside, Daniel steered them toward a narrow exit ramp leading away from the bay. As they emerged into the open night, the city stretched out beneath them like a web of glowing lines. Distant lightning lit up the clouds, revealing the sprawling network of buildings and streets. Laria's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. Her voice quiet. The outer zones are the only place they won't follow, but it's far. And the routes are dangerous. Daniel smirked faintly. I've done dangerous before. They sped along an elevated track, the wind whipping against them for a brief moment. The city noise was replaced by the rush of air and the rhythm of the transport's engine, but that peace didn't last. A high-pitched whine cut through the night air. Daniel's eyes darted upward, catching sight of two sleek hunter drones swooping in from the rooftops. Their eyes glowed the same red as the cloaked figures. Hold on, Daniel said, shifting the controls sharply. The transport swerved, sparks flying as it scraped the guardrail. The drones dove after them, weapons unfolding from their sides. Bolts of bright energy scorched the track behind them. Laria's hands gripped the seat. They'll disable the transport. Daniel scanned the route ahead, spotting an intersection, where one track dropped into a covered freight tunnel. Not if I lose them first, he muttered. He pushed the engine harder, the hum rising to a strained whine at the last moment. He veered sharply into the freight tunnel. The sudden darkness swallowed them, the only light coming from the flicker of the dashboard. The drones followed, their glow casting strange shadows across the walls. Daniel's jaw tightened. He yanked the controls to the side, skimming dangerously close to a row of hanging cargo chains. One of the drones clipped a chain and spun out, crashing into the tunnel wall in a burst of sparks. The second drone hesitated, giving Daniel the opening to surge ahead. Minutes later, they burst out of the tunnel into the rain again. The city's edge loomed ahead, beyond which only darkness and faint stars stretched. Laria glanced back to see the last drone still searching the tunnel they'd escaped. Her shoulders slumped in relief, though her eyes still held worry. Daniel eased the transport speed, the pounding in his chest slowing. We're not safe yet, he said, but we've got some breathing room. Laria looked at him, her voice soft. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Daniel kept his eyes on the dark horizon. I know enough, he said simply. The wind carried the faint smell of wet soil now, a sign they were nearing the far limits of the city. But somewhere behind them, in the streets they'd left behind, the hunters would already be regrouping. And Daniel knew the next move would be even harder to predict. The wind grew colder as they neared the city's outer rim. The bright towers and glowing streets were far behind now, replaced by scattered lights and wide stretches of dark, empty ground. Daniel kept the transport low, its engine humming softly. Against the night, Laria sat beside him, her eyes scanning the shadows beyond the track. She hadn't spoken in minutes, and her silence carried a weight that pressed between them when the outline of the last security checkpoint came into view. Daniel slowed. The tall metal gates were lit by harsh white lights, guards in dark armor standing at each side. Laria's hand brushed his arm. We can't go through, she whispered. They'll have my image here by now. Daniel nodded, his eyes drifting to the chain-link fence that stretched beyond the gates, topped with coils of razor wire. Past that fence lay the open plains that led to the outer zones. He stopped the transport in the shadow of a maintenance shed. "Cutting the engine, we go around," he said. They slipped out, the wet ground squelching under their boots. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, making the air thick and cool. Daniel led them along the fence until the checkpoint lights were a faint glow behind them. His eyes caught on a section where the fence sagged slightly. The wire rusted and loose. Lariah crouched beside him, working at the twisted metal with careful hands. The sound of the wire bending was sharp in the quiet night. Daniel kept watch. Scanning the dark for any movement, he froze when a faint glint caught his eye. A small hovering orb drifting low along the fence. Its red sensor lights swept the ground like a searchlight. He grabbed Lariah's wrist and pulled her down into the wet grass. The orb floated past them, its hum fading slowly into the distance. They didn't move until it was gone. Then, with one final twist, Lariah opened a gap in the fence just wide enough to slip through. On the other side, the ground turned rough. Patches of broken concrete mixed with wild grass. The city was behind them now, its glow softened by the rain, but the sense of safety never came. They moved quickly toward a line of old cargo containers stacked near the edge of a freight yard. Daniel's plan was to cut across and use the rail lines as cover until they were well into the outer lands. But as they approached, a low voice came from the shadows between the containers. Well, the voice drawled. "You've made it farther than I thought." Daniel froze, his eyes adjusted to the gloom, revealing a tall figure stepping forward. His cloak was black, but carried faint silver patterns that shifted like liquid. The hood fell back to reveal pale, angular features and cold, sharp eyes that fixed on Lariah. "Come here," the man said, his tone smooth but edged with authority. "Your running ends now." Lariah's breath caught. She took a step back. "Lord Sereth," she whispered. Daniel felt the name like a stone dropping into water. The way she said it told him this was the one, the powerful figure who had sent hunters after her. The man's lips curved slightly. "You cost me time, girl, and now you bring me a human." Interesting. Daniel stepped between them, his stance steady. "She's not going anywhere with you." Sereth's gaze slid over Daniel like he was nothing more than an insect in the way. "Do you even know what she is? Human? Do you know what her blood is worth?" Daniel didn't answer, but Lariah spoke, her voice trembling. "Don't tell him." The alien lord's smile widened faintly. "Ah, so you haven't told him?" He took a slow step forward. "She carries a rare genetic line, one that my rivals would kill to possess. With her, I can secure my place among the ruling houses. Without her, others will try." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Not happening." He said again. Sarut's eyes hardened. "You think you can protect her?" "You have no idea how many I've sent after you already." From the shadows behind him, more cloaked hunters emerged, their red glowing hoods forming a half circle. Daniel's mind raced. They were cut off from the containers, the fence too far to reach, and fighting here meant being surrounded. Then, faintly at first, a deep rumble began to build in the ground beneath their feet. Lariah's eyes darted toward the rail lines. "A freight hauler," she whispered. The sound grew louder, the metallic thunder of massive wheels approaching fast. Daniel's eyes flicked to the moving train in the distance. A plan formed in his mind, risky, but better than standing still. He grabbed Lariah's hand. "Run," he said. They sprinted toward the tracks, Sereth's voice snapping commands behind them. The hunters followed, their steps quick and sure. The ground vibrated harder as the massive hauler roared into view, carrying stacks of cargo taller than a building. Daniel didn't slow. He leaped onto the ladder fixed to the side of one of the containers, pulling Lariah up after him. The cold wind of the train's speed whipped against them as they clung to the metal. Below, the hunters skidded to a halt, the train's size and speed cutting off their pursuit. Sareth stood still in the rain, watching them disappear into the distance, his expression unreadable, but his voice carried in the wind. "You can run, human. But she will be mine." Daniel didn't look back. The darkness ahead was dangerous, but at least they had put distance between themselves and the city. For now, that was enough. The freight hauler roared through the darkness, its endless line of cargo containers rattling against the tracks. Daniel and Lariah clung to the cold metal ladder, the wind cutting against their faces. The lights of the city were long gone now, replaced by a black horizon dotted with faint stars. The rain had stopped, but the damp air still clung to their skin. Daniel pulled himself onto the narrow platform at the end of the container. Helping Lariah up after him, they crouched low, the metal groaning under their weight around them. The train stretched in both directions, a steel snake racing into the unknown. Lariah's hands trembled as she gripped the railing. Her eyes kept shifting toward the darkness outside the tracks. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "Sareth, he always gets what he wants." Daniel glanced at her, his voice firm. "Not this time." They moved along the narrow walkway between containers, their boots thudding softly against the metal. The air was filled with the low roar of wheels grinding against the rails. Every few seconds, a flash of light from the train's front would sweep across the land, revealing a barren stretch of rock and dry soil. The outer lands had begun. As they passed another container, Daniel froze. He caught a faint sound under the constant rumble, a soft, metallic click. Lariah stopped too, her eyes narrowing. Then it came again, closer this time, a deliberate movement that didn't belong to the train. Daniel motioned for her to stay behind him. He crept forward, peering around the edge of the container. A dark figure crouched there, clinging to the metal like a shadow. The red glow under its hood pulsed once, then twice. The hunter had been here the whole time, waiting, before Daniel could react. The hunter lunged. The impact slammed him against the railing, the metal vibrating under the force. Lariah cried out, but Daniel pushed back, locking his arm against the hunter's throat. The train's speed made every movement dangerous. One wrong step could send them both into the darkness below. The hunter swung a blade, the edge flashing in the dim light. Daniel twisted, feeling it graze his arm. Pain shot up, but he didn't loosen his grip with a hard shove. He forced the hunter back against the container. The blade clattered to the floor. Sliding toward the edge, the hunter hissed something in its own language. The words, sharp and cold. Daniel didn't understand them, but he understood the intent. He drove his fist into the hunter's side, then another into its jaw. The hood snapped back slightly, revealing pale skin crisscrossed with scars before the hunter could recover. Daniel hooked his boot under the blade and kicked it over the edge. It vanished into the night, swallowed by the rushing ground below. The hunter snarled and reached for Daniel's throat, but Lariah moved, grabbing a loose metal rod from the side of the walkway. She swung it hard, striking the hunter across the head. The figure staggered, and Daniel used the moment to shove him off the train. The wind caught the cloaked body, pulling it away into the darkness. They stood still for a moment, the sound of the train filling the silence. Daniel turned to Lariah, breathing hard. "You all right?" She nodded, though her hands still shook. You could have died, so could you," he replied, giving her a faint, tired smile. They moved on, weaving through the maze of containers. Eventually they found an open one with crates stacked inside. Daniel helped her climb in, and they settled against the wooden boxes. The walls muffled the wind, giving them a moment to breathe. Lariah sat with her knees pulled close, her voice low. "Daniel, there's something I didn't tell you." He looked at her. "I'm listening." Her eyes shimmered faintly in the dark. "Sareth doesn't just want me for my bloodline, my family. They made a deal with him. When I was born, I was promised to him as part of an alliance. I was raised knowing that one day I'd be taken to his house. I thought I could live with it. But when the day came, I ran. Daniel's jaw tightened. So this was planned your whole life? She nodded. If he catches me, it's not just him I have to fear. My own people will give me back to him. They'd rather see me as his possession than see me free. Daniel didn't speak for a moment. His gaze moved to the small opening in the container wall where faint moonlight seeped through. Then Don't let him catch you. Not them, not anyone. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to argue, but instead she just looked at him, as if trying to believe in the certainty of his words. The train rattled on through the night, somewhere in the distance. The land shifted from rocky plains to jagged cliffs. The sound of the wheels echoed differently here. Sharper, Daniel's instincts stirred again. He peered through the opening and froze in the distance on a parallel track. A smaller, faster vehicle was racing alongside the train. Its dark shape blended with the night, but the faint red glow of two lights at its front gave it away. "They've found us," Daniel muttered. Liriah moved to look, her breath catching. "It's Sereth's riders." The vehicle drew closer, and Daniel could see the figures standing on its deck. Their hoods lifted, weapons ready. The train had been their escape for only a short time, and now the chase had found them again. The riders closed the distance fast, the hum of their engines cutting through the night like the growl of predators. Daniel and Liriah pressed against the container wall, watching as the dark vehicle pulled alongside the moving train. Rain from earlier still clung to the metal surfaces, making every step risky. But the hunters didn't slow. 3 cloaked figures leaped from the vehicle onto the narrow walkway between containers, landing with a heavy thud that rattled the steel. Under Daniel's boots, the red glow beneath their hoods lit their pale faces for a moment before they moved forward with swift, practiced steps. Daniel grabbed Liriah's hand and pulled her toward the back of the container. "We have to keep moving," he said. His eyes darted to the ladder leading up to the train's roof. Up, they climbed quickly, the cold wind hitting them the moment they emerged onto the roof. The night sky above was wide and endless, lit only by faint stars and the occasional flash of lightning far in the distance. Daniel stayed low, the train speed making every movement dangerous. Liriah followed close, her hair whipping wildly in the wind. The hunters emerged from the side, climbing onto the roof with unnerving agility. Their cloaks snapped in the air as they spread out, forcing Daniel and Liriah toward the edge. The steel beneath them vibrated with the train's power. One of the hunters moved first, lunging at Daniel with a curved blade. Daniel ducked. Feeling the blade slice through the air above his head, he countered with a sharp elbow to the hunter's side, the impact making the figure stumble on the slick roof. Another came from the left, forcing Daniel to roll aside just in time to avoid a strike. Liriah backed away, her foot slipping near the edge. Daniel caught her arm, steadying her, but the brief moment cost him. A blade grazed his shoulder. Burning hot through his jacket, he gritted his teeth, refusing to let go. The wind roared around them, drowning out everything except the clash of metal and the pounding of their hearts. Daniel knew they couldn't fight all of them here, not on this surface. One wrong move would mean falling into the darkness below. He scanned the train ahead and spotted an open flatbed car carrying large heavy crates tied down with thick straps. If they could reach it, they could use the crates for cover. He leaned close to Liriah's ear, his voice almost lost in the wind. "Follow me and don't stop." Without waiting for her answer, he charged forward, ducking under another blade and shoving the attacker aside. Liriah ran after him, their boots clanging against the metal. The hunters gave chase, their steps light but sure. They reached the flatbed, Daniel vaulting over the gap between cars. Landing hard and rolling behind one of the crates, Liriah followed. her breath coming in short bursts. The hunters leaped after them, but the space between the crates broke their line of sight. Daniel picked up a loose strap and wrapped it around his hands like a makeshift weapon. The first hunter rounded the crate and lunged. Daniel sidestepped, looping the strap around the figure's arm and yanking hard. The momentum sent the hunter sprawling toward the edge, a desperate grab at the railing saving him from falling. Another came from the other side, but Lariah moved first this time. Grabbing a metal rod that had come loose from the crate's frame, she swung it with all her strength. The blow landing against the side of the hunter's head, the figure staggered. Giving Daniel the chance to shove him over the railing, his cloak flared once before he vanished into the dark. The last hunter hesitated, then stepped back toward the gap between the cars. His voice carried over the wind. "You can't keep her forever." Human. Then, in a sudden leap, he vanished into the shadows. Landing back on the pursuing vehicle, which slowed and veered away into the darkness beside the tracks, Daniel leaned against the crate, his breathing heavy. The fight had been quick, but every second had balanced between survival and disaster. Lariah lowered the rod, her hands trembling. She looked at him with wide eyes. "You keep risking your life for me, Daniel." Gave a faint, tired smile. "I told you I wasn't going to leave you." The train began to slow, the steel groan of its brakes cutting through the night. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "We're stopping," he said. That wasn't part of the plan. The outer lands were still far ahead, and there was no station out here. The train rolled to a crawl before stopping completely, the air filled with silence except for the soft hiss of cooling metal. Daniel moved to the edge and looked down. His stomach tightened. Below, in the dim moonlight, stood a group of figures surrounding the train. They weren't hunters. Their armor was heavier, their weapons larger, and at the center of them all, stepping forward with calm confidence, was Lord Sereth himself. His cloak barely moved in the night breeze, and his eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Lariah saw him and froze, her breath catching. In her throat, Daniel's fists clenched. The hunters hadn't needed to catch the train in motion. They'd forced it to stop, and now there was nowhere to run. The night felt heavier than before, the air thick with the weight of what stood below. Sereth's pale face tilted upward toward the roof of the train, his sharp eyes locking onto Lariah as if the rest of the world didn't exist. The soldiers around him stood in perfect formation, their heavy boots planted firmly in the dirt, weapons ready but not raised. They didn't need to rush. They believed there was no escape. Daniel's heart pounded, his mind working fast. The flatbed roof beneath him felt too exposed, too open, if they stayed here. Sereth's men could climb up in seconds. If they jumped, they'd be surrounded before they hit the ground. He scanned the shadows beyond the soldiers and saw the jagged outline of an old water tower a short distance away. The rusted metal legs reached high, and the base was half hidden by tall weeds. It was risky, but it was the only thing not under Sereth's control. Lariah's voice was tight with fear. "Daniel, he won't let me live if he takes me." He looked at her and spoke quietly. "Then we make sure he doesn't take you." She shook her head. "You can't fight him. He's not like the others." Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "I don't have to fight him. I just have to outthink him." The soldiers began moving, two of them starting to climb the side of the train. Daniel grabbed Lariah's hand and pulled her toward the opposite edge. The drop was steep, the ground far below. He pointed to the water tower. "We run for that." Without giving her time to argue, he jumped, rolling as he hit the ground to absorb the impact. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he pushed it aside and reached up for Lariah. She landed beside him, and together they sprinted toward the weeds. The sound of boots thudding against the earth followed instantly. Sereth's voice carried over the noise, calm and certain. "Don't kill the human." Yet the tall grass clawed at their legs as they pushed through. The tower loomed closer, its metal legs streaked with rust. Daniel spotted a ladder bolted to one side. He motioned for Lariah to climb. She hesitated only a second before grabbing. The cold rungs, Daniel stayed at the base until she was halfway up, then followed. His muscles burned, but the sound of pursuit below drove him faster. Sereth's soldiers reached the base of the tower, shouting up at them. A shot cracked the night, the impact sparking against the metal rung inches from Daniel's hand. He kept climbing, forcing himself not to look down. They reached the top platform. The wind stronger here, carrying the smell of rust and rain. The huge water tank above them creaked softly. The metal old and weathered. Daniel crouched low, scanning their surroundings. Sereth's men were already starting to climb from the other side. Lariah's voice was a whisper. "We're trapped." Daniel's eyes flicked to the thick pipes running from the tank down into the ground. An idea forming fast. He pulled a small utility blade from his pocket, the same one he'd taken from a fallen hunter days ago. Moving quickly, he slashed through the worn leather straps that held the main valve in place. The metal groaned, the seal hissing. Lariah's eyes widened. "Daniel, what are you doing?" He glanced at her, making sure they can't follow us. The first soldier's head appeared above the edge, his hand gripping the railing. Daniel twisted the valve hard. The old seal gave way with a scream of metal, and suddenly a torrent of cold water exploded from the tank. The force knocked the climbing soldiers from the ladder, sending them crashing into the mud below. The platform shuddered under the release, water spraying in every direction. In the chaos, Daniel grabbed Lariah's hand and led her down the far side of the tower. The wet rungs slick under their grip. They reached the ground and splashed through the flooded grass. Using the sudden rush of water to mask their escape, behind them, Sereth stood in the rising water. Watching them run, his soldiers regrouped. Around him, their weapons raised, but their shots wild in the spray. Sereth's expression was calm, almost amused, as he called after them, "Run as far as you like. She belongs to me." Daniel didn't slow. Pulling Lariah toward the faint glow of distant lights, his legs ached, his lungs burned. But the only thing that mattered was putting more distance between them and Sereth. The sound of the water faded. Behind them, replaced by the quiet hum of the outer lands at night. When they finally stopped, breathless, they stood on the edge of a long, empty road that disappeared into the dark horizon. Lariah turned to him, her voice trembling but filled with something new. "Hope, we made it." For now, Daniel met her gaze, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "For now is enough. We'll keep moving, we'll stay ahead, and one day, we'll make sure he can't ever follow." The wind carried their breaths into the night, the stars above shining cold and clear. And though the danger wasn't over, for the first time since he found her crying in the street, Daniel felt like they had a real chance.